Have you ever wondered how anyone can possibly afford to live in Switzerland? It's well known that Switzerland is one of the most expensive countries to live in. I'm not here to pretend that that's not the case, but I am here to tell you that you don't need to be a banker or a surgeon to afford life in Switzerland. Yes, life is expensive here, but salaries, generally speaking, match the cost of living. My name's Sarah, and after graduating from King's Medical School in London, I moved to Switzerland to pursue my medical residency. Here are 10 things that I'm currently doing or have done in the last couple of years living in Switzerland that makes living here a lot more affordable and even comparatively cheaper than living in London, which, fair enough, is also an expensive city. I've picked these up over the years from trial and error and learning from others who have moved to Switzerland and also just picking up habits from Swiss people. Let's get started. Here are the 10 things that I'm currently doing or have done to make life in Switzerland a lot more affordable and save thousands of francs every year. Number 1 may be a bit questionable, but I'm sorry, it's the reality, and anyone who says otherwise is just trying to hide the truth. And that is doing your grocery shopping in France. While this might sound a bit strange, France is a neighbouring country to Switzerland, and an average grocery shop for a week or a month can be 30 to up to 50% cheaper in France. Now, I said questionable because there's a bit of a love-hate relationship between Swiss and French people, especially along the border, and it's due to multiple reasons which I'm not going to go into. But the reality is, I know a lot of Swiss people who cross over the border every weekend or every month and do their grocery shopping in France. It just makes sense financially. Now, obviously for this, you need to be close to the border because if you live on the other side of Switzerland, it doesn't really make sense to spend all that money on fuel to be able to grocery shop in France. But since Switzerland is quite a small country and neighbouring countries generally have lower costs, even if you go to Germany, which a lot of people do as well, it can save you a lot of money on groceries. I can't remember the word for when you get a pay rise and then you increase your expenditure, your weekly, monthly expenditure. There's a name for it. But anyways, just be aware of that. So if all of a sudden you start grocery shopping in France and you realize that it's so much cheaper than Switzerland, the risk is, and I've done this as well, you end up buying more than you need because you're used to spending a certain amount and all of a sudden you get way more for the same amount. So the whole point of this video is making life in Switzerland more affordable and therefore spending less for the same amount rather than the same amount for more stuff. My second tip is to make friends to learn the language. So first of all, in relation to this video, taking a language class can be very expensive and learning the language is something you definitely need if you're thinking of moving and living in Switzerland. So you can't really not learn the language, but the way to get around this is to try and kill multiple birds with one stone. So instead of paying for a class, I would join a social activity. I would sign up to a hiking group, for example, and that way you get to be out in nature, meet people who have similar interests, and it's also the best way to put yourself in scenarios where you have to practice the language. It might even be better than taking a language class where, yes, you speak the language for an hour, maybe a couple of times a week or 1 or 2 times a week realistically, but going out there and actually meeting the people and speaking to the people in their native tongue is the most effective and cheapest way to learn a language. If you're not an extrovert and you're not very comfortable doing that, the other thing you can do to learn a language instead of paying for a class is to look online. There's loads of websites where you can exchange language skills. So you can teach somebody English or whatever language for half an hour, let's say, and then they teach you their language for half an hour and it's free. And that's a really great way to learn the language and then also help someone else learn a language they're interested in. Point number 3 is to choose where you live in Switzerland wisely. So I mean choosing your canton. So Switzerland is split into different cantons and they each have their own laws and different tax brackets. And they can vary enormously. So the tax bracket can literally double between 2 cantons. So do your research and have a look at which areas would be more financially interesting and then see if you're willing to move there. Are there other things that you don't have in that area that you could definitely have where there's a high tax bracket? Usually it's to do with family, job, etc., etc. But it's definitely worth knowing that there's a big disparity within Switzerland that can be the difference between thousands of francs saved or spent every year. Number 4 is not going to be anyone's favorite, but I do feel like it needs to be mentioned. Learn to cook at home. Eating out in Switzerland is notoriously pricey. Depending on where you are, you can easily spend around 80 to 100 francs for 2 people having a drink and a main meal. Now, if this is what brings you joy in life and it really matters to you to have these dining out experiences, then by all means go for it. This list of things is not meant to remove every joy and pleasure of moving to Switzerland. It's more to identify where there can be a lot of costs, and therefore, if it's not something that really matters to you and you can still enjoy lots of other things in life, then it could be something that you consider reducing or completely ruling out so that you can either save your money or spend it on things that actually matter to you more. The other option, if you really want to dine out but you can't imagine spending that much money that often, and this is related to the first point, is eating out in France. So if you live close to the border, you can always go to Germany, to France or other neighbouring countries, and people do that all the time. You'll see on the weekends there's way more Swiss people in France, and it just makes sense. Restaurant prices are so much cheaper, and people who live on either side of the border will naturally try and reap the benefits of both countries. Point number 5 is also related to food, and it's got a double benefit of wasting wasting less food. So you might have heard of this application called Too Good To Go. There's a bunch of them in Switzerland. It actually operates in lots of different countries, and the idea is that lots of restaurants, bakeries and supermarkets will share on this app when they've got stuff that's about to expire that they want to give out for a much cheaper price. So typically it'll be a surprise bundle. You can put specific requirements like a vegetarian bundle, and you'll have all sorts in there. So you can get a random array of like chips, hummus, a rotisserie chicken, whatever they have that's not been sold and that's still not expired, but that they can't sell the next day. That is a really smart way to get a lot of your groceries done, but for less than half the price. And you also know that you're helping to reduce food waste. Now, this may not be a great option if you like to plan things in advance and you're not ready to go for a last minute pickup to a supermarket. It's also not ideal if you have specific dietary requirements and you need a certain amount of protein for each meal and you don't want to have any junk at all. You can get a few random products in the surprise bundle. But to be honest, if you work somewhere and you pick up a bundle, there's a bunch of things you're not interested in, you can always bring it to colleagues at work and then complete your shopping around what you already have. So it is a really interesting option that can save you quite a lot of money. Next, in no particular order, number 6 would be to buy secondhand furniture. Now, because Switzerland is a small country and there's a lot of expats, people are moving in and out of apartments all the time, especially if you're in a big city or if you're near the border. It's ridiculous. That's why it does not make sense to buy new furniture. People are giving away relatively new stuff for a fraction of the price, if not for free. There's a bunch of websites that you can look at in Switzerland as well as in France if you live near the border, and I'll put that up around here somewhere or in the description down below. I know people who have furnished their entire apartment just through these websites for a fraction of the price, and this will save you hundreds to thousands of francs. So definitely have a look at these before you think of buying new furniture. Number 7 is a bit of an obvious one, but I also feel like it needs a mention. Living in Switzerland can be cheaper than in other countries depending on your habits. So get used to doing free activities on your weekends instead of spending money in cities. Switzerland is the best place to do that. There are so many amazing hikes that you can go on that are very accessible and are absolutely free. Yes, there are a lot of amazing paid things to do here, but honestly, if I had to pick one thing, it would be nature, and it's free. Yes, some places might be a bit pricey because you need to take a funicular and different public transports, but some of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in Switzerland are accessible and free, so make use of it. I think that was number 7. So number 8 is going to be related to activities as well, and this one you just need to know. So every country has a set of apps and websites where you can get discount deals for activities for those days where you do actually want to spend money on a social activity. And one of the most known ones in Switzerland, which I only found out about quite recently, is called Coca. Now, it's very seasonal. Sometimes there's nothing very interesting on there and it's pretty pricey stuff anyways, but sometimes they have really interesting deals. So just recently, instead of paying 180 francs for a gym membership, I got one for 50 francs. A friend of mine got a really interesting deal for a camper van, which he took across Switzerland for a fraction of the usual price. So that's also a great place to look if you want to save money and also enjoy life in Switzerland. Okay, we're getting to the end. Number 9, and this will also save you thousands of francs. And I only started doing this recently. It is get an accountant. I know this sounds like a fancy rich people thing to do. That's what I used to think. So when you receive your payslip in the UK, your taxes have already been removed. So you don't need to worry about that. That is not the case in Switzerland. So every year, like in many countries, but this was new to me, you need to declare your taxes. And so many things can impact this. Where you live in Switzerland, so the canton, is going to have a big impact, like we mentioned before. If you're married, if you have kids, if you've moved houses, if you've changed canton in the year, that can make it complicated as well. So it can be a bit of a headache. I struggled through it in the beginning, but I quickly realized that all my Swiss colleagues went to an accountant to do it. And the reason why this is so financially interesting is that for a fixed sum of around 100 to 150 francs, you have an expert who is sorting out your taxes. So A, it's less stress, but B, they know exactly how much they can deduct from your taxes. And there's a lot of stuff you can deduct. For example, in the medical sphere, the cost of training days, traveling to and from the hospital, cafeteria food. There's so many things I didn't even know I could remove from my taxes. And that has the potential of saving you thousands of francs. And that's something that I'm definitely going to keep doing because time-wise, money-wise, stress-wise, it's a win on all fronts as far as I'm concerned. And for point number 10, the last point to save you money in Switzerland, is to get a bike. Now, this is an obvious thing to say when we're talking about saving money. It's actually a really good idea for 2 reasons. Number 1, having a car is just expensive. Parking space is ridiculous. It's hard to find and it's very pricey. So if you can avoid having a car, ditch the car. The second reason why getting a bike is a good idea is that it's encouraged in Switzerland. That means that you have different programs, whether it's the canton itself or your workplace, which is the case for my hospital, where they actually pay you to get a bike. So they don't pay the full cost of the bike, but let's say your bike costs, I don't know, 600 quid. they'll pay up to 50 to 60% of the cost. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a pretty good deal to me, especially if you're planning on getting a bike anyways, because having a car is so pricey. You now only have to pay less than 50% of the cost. I mean, this as well, it's not something that's advertised. I found this out from a friend just randomly who mentioned it, and it's written somewhere on the company's website or on the Canton's website, but you need to know to look for it. So now you know. So if you don't want to have a car and you're not a biker and you need to use the public transport system, the next best option is to look at the Swiss transport system, which is amazing and very timely, but also pricey. And depending on how often you're going to use it, it can be a very good idea to get a travel card. This could also save you a couple of £100 every single year. So there you have it. These are 10 things that you can do to make life in Switzerland way more affordable than you think. Let me know if you knew about any of these in the comments down below. And if you have any tips of your own, please do share so that we can all benefit. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.